What is up? Happy Monday, y'all. Bob here. I am so glad you're all here. 61, nice. I'm excited. Per usual, I didn't give you all much notice. I'll try to get better at that. I really will. I'm still learning, and things that I'm learning, I will incorporate as we move forward on the channel. And I think by the end of the day, I should be pretty good at this. I'm learning, though. I'm learning a lot quickly. One of the things that I learned is how to portal or transfer y'all in the chat right into Jay, because right after our show tonight, the Shaming of Jay has what I consider to be an amazing show tonight with Julie Murray, who, if you are not aware of who she is an absolutely badass woman. She is just a marvel. She's an advocate. If you don't know any of her background, her sister Maura Murray went missing and is still missing in an unsolved case, and she has been advocating for as long as I can remember. And she's an incredible human being, and she's got a lot of really important, powerful things to say. So if you're here, I highly suggest you follow that portal right over to Jay's show and enjoy that and just soak it all in, because you guys will just, you'll love it. It's going to be one of those like very powerful shows. So I'm excited to do that. Hopefully the portal works. Jay made me a old man video showing me how to do it. I think I did it right. So I guess we'll find out. That'll be exciting. But tonight, so what we're doing, and I have a guest who I'm super excited about tonight. You guys probably know and love him. If you don't, he is an amazing man. He is one of those guys that's in the true crime community that I am so happy that he is out there kicking his knowledge, kicking his wisdom, and giving us, like what I do, just facts. And that's Joe Giacalone. And let me give you his bio before I bring him on, because he'll start blushing because his bio is so killer. But Joe, 20-year NYPD homicide. He has done, and I'm going to read through the things that he's done. Beyond that, he's got a BBA from Hofstra in banking and finance. Hoi polloi. He also has an MA from John Jay College in criminal justice. So he is highly educated. He has some of the positions that he held when he was NYPD: commanding officer of the Bronx Cold Case Squad, commanding officer Crime Stoppers Unit, executive officer Detective Bureau Training Unit. I mean, this guy has done it all. Director, the NYPD Homicide School, the executive officer of the 110th Precinct Detective Squad. The man's a teacher. He's an adjunct right now, teaching cops how to be good cops. He writes books. He's got the Criminal Investigative Function, and that's a guide for new investigators. He's got the Cold Case Handbook. I mean, the man's a legend. The man does it all. The man is knowledgeable, because I don't have people that aren't knowledgeable on my show. That's just fact. So without further ado, let's bring him on. Joe Giacalone, how are you, my friend?
Good, Bob. Good to see you again.
You too, man. How you doing?
Good, hanging in there. Don't know what kind of weather. Don't know what kind of clothes to wear these days. When some day it's 80, the next day it's 40. So we're at that stage.
Tell me, man. It's like, yeah, Chicago's the same way. It's like we're like in our glorious 2 weeks of fall right now, and then by next week we'll have our first snow. So it's like we get 2 really nice weeks of fall where it's like that 60 degrees, all the trees are changing colors, it's beautiful, and boop, we're right into it, right into hell for the next 5 months. So you guys are similar in New York, but I don't think it's quite as like it really happens quickly here in Chicago. It's one
Yeah.
of those things that's just like clockwork every year. So look, man, I want to talk to you about a bunch of things. I'm really excited to have you on. It's your maiden voyage here on my show, and I hope that I'll be on your show, your channel. And why don't you tell the folks first of all where they can find you?
Okay, I'm at YouTube, and then at my name, Joseph Giacalone. I do a show, True Crime with the Sarge. I have a couple of shows I try to do each week, generally on a Tuesday night, and one of the days on the weekends. Just started it about 6 or 7 weeks ago, and we're building up quite an audience, and I'm kind of excited about it.
You're killing it, man. You're absolutely killing it. Last I saw, you were right like at 1,700 subscribers, which is awesome. Maybe a little more than that. So like. Same, man. Like I am I'm new to this space too. So we're both kind of neophytes in terms
Yeah,
of running this thing on our own, but I'm proud of both of us. I think that we're both doing a great job. And I'm super, super excited about what you got going on tomorrow, which just tell the folks what's happening tomorrow. We'll get into it a little more as we progress through this next hour, but like just let them know what they can look for, and our mods will be putting in all the links in the chat. So y'all make sure that you're following everything that Joe's doing, because if you want the content, he's the guy to go to. So what's up for tomorrow, man? What do you got going on?
11 a.m. tomorrow Eastern Daylight Savings Time. I have the Suffolk County Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison's going to be on the show. He said he can give me 45 minutes, so I have a bunch of questions packed in. I mean, listen, the guy is the police commissioner. He's pretty busy. He's got his hands tied up, but he's giving me 45 minutes. We're going to get into Gilgo, and he actually, he told me he doesn't want to know any questions. Just hit him with it, and he did, warn me too that there's certain questions if I ask him, he's not going to be able to answer just because it's an active investigation. So, in the beginning, we'll probably rehash a couple of things. We'll talk about the press conference, of course, last week, and there have been additional affidavits drawn up when I've learned to. So it's going to get quite interesting.
Yeah, I think it's going to be amazing content, man. So Joe, I hit Joe up last week. I'm like, yo, man, I want to have you on. He's like, oh, yeah. He's like, cool. Because we had been talking about getting him on for a hot minute. And Joe was like, hey, and like, I don't know, was that the day the affidavits dropped? I think it was.
Yeah,
so
probably.
You got them over to me. I, of course, wasn't going to mention them, but I did want to read them. I knew that was your baby. So I was like, oh yeah, man, send them over to me. I want to check them out. And they're interesting. They're interesting. And we're going to get into those because I'm dying to know what your candid opinion of those particular documents are. As we know, the person who drafted them it happens to be an attorney, and he's been heavily advocating for Shannon Gilbert for a long time. You know what I mean? And he's always been in the mindset that, Shannon was a victim of Lisk and or Gilgo, or of both if they happen to be the same person. So, he's the one kind of steering that ship. He's the one who actually drafted it. And we're talking about John Ray, who's an attorney. And he's an interesting character. I am obviously a criminal defense attorney, retired for the most part, but I kind of, the way he injects himself into situations is interesting to me. That wasn't typically my move as a criminal defense attorney. It's not to say like, it's kind of my move now, like where I'm trying to, if I think that I'm sniffing something, that there's something wrong, or there's something that needs to be exposed. Like, I'm not afraid to go out there and use my knowledge in terms of the judicial system, the criminal justice system to shed some light on things. Which kind of leads me into, I wanted to talk about, you recently took a field trip which I was supposed to join you on, which I completely stood you up on, which I apologize for, man. Life, of course, got in the way with that. But you were out in Delphi, Indiana recently, yes?
Right. Yeah, I was invited to speak at Purdue University at their cold case symposium. So I had taken the car and taken a drive out there, and I got there a little bit early because I'm always early. That's been unfortunately because I was brought up like if you're not 15 minutes early, you're late kind of thing. So I got there a couple of days early, and I did some research and some sightseeing. So of course Delphi is only about 25 minutes or so from Purdue. So it was I said I'm going to take a ride, and the weather was great. So I went out there
It
just
looked
to
to
get.
be a gorgeous day, man. Like you
Yeah.
were filming, and it looked like a perfect kind of fall day out there.
Yeah, it was a little chilly, and of course, I wasn't prepared to, dress properly, whatever. But that's always the case.
Yeah,
There I am on my shorts and my little hoodie, but there was, but there was, nobody there. But I mean, they really did a nice job with the trail, right? I wasn't there before, but I did see videos, of course. When back from when this case first broke, the news and everybody was there, and everything was kind of like in disrepair, like the bridge and everything else like that, and. So I took the walk. It was only, I think it's like a mile and a half all told. And, it's a nice walk. They don't allow bikes or skateboards or anything like that. But I was the only person there. I walked all the way up to, they did they did about probably half the bridge. And they redid that thing. I don't know if they're going to do all of it because there's all kinds of signs that say private property now and everything else. And,
right.
listen, that's not my gig. If it says private property, that's good enough for me. I'm not going any further than that.
Yeah, the trespassing thing is always problematic. It's like I've had those circumstances where I was chasing this one case with this gal, Lucy Studi, who I had basically developed a friendship with. And like her backstory was that she was claiming that her father was a serial killer and that he had buried somewhere between 50 and 70 people on the property, that being the neighboring property, not their old property. So and this is out in this little area in rural Iowa called Green Hollow. It's kind of a haunting name a little bit too, because it literally was like a Tennessee holler. You know what I mean? It was like kind of a carved out area with like in between like two craggy rock buttes, like just like an area that didn't seem like it belonged at all in Iowa farmland, which is typically flat. Like you just don't see that kind of terrain out there. At any rate, I was out there and it was the same deal. I knew that the bodies were alleged to have been buried on the neighboring property, and I got out there and I was TikToking it live, and I'm out there, which I then found out that all the cops in the area were watching my TikTok, so they knew what was going on. So I was like very careful to say, hey, I'm definitely not going to be trespassing onto Mr. Smith's land at this point. As much as I kind of want to, I'm not going to do it. So yeah, I mean, in terms of as much as we might want to creep over into that, but yeah, it's probably best that we don't, because it can end up in an arrest. And it's better for on the streets, Joe, not in the joint for trespassing on people's property. So are you keeping up with what's going on in Delphi at all?
Yeah, I've been following, of course, that whole thing with the Odinism thing a couple of weeks ago, and that started with the defense attorneys, and then the defense attorney ups and quits or gets fired or what have you. I mean, there's all kinds of who knows exactly what's going on there, but
Yeah.
I was trying to get a feel for the town. I went into the town. I went, where the CVS, where the suspect, the alleged suspect, worked. I went to where the bar used to be. It's now a Mexican restaurant. I didn't want to make a spectacle of myself. I was just in there, just interested to get a feel for the town and see if anybody wanted to talk. Nobody really wants to talk about it, that kind of thing. It's just, I think it's such a small town, and a lot of people just want to move on from this already. And and I just wish that people wouldn't, torture the family anymore about this thing too. I mean, people knocking on their doors, I'm told. I mean, come on, guys.
Yeah, the families have been, because it went cold for 5 years. You know what I mean? So it's like they're living through that nightmare for 5 years. They finally make an arrest on it, and that changes the scope of things. That changes everything. It turns from being a cold case to now they got somebody in custody, and and that was one of the things that I want to ask you. Now, I don't know what your opinion on that probable cause affidavit is, but I've been very critical of it. And I don't do it in the sense that, I want to upset the families. But, when I look at, say, for instance, the bail application that was done for Rex Heuermann, which had they not gotten a grand jury indictment, that would have been the probable cause affidavit. And you look at the strength of that particular document. You look at what went into that investigation. Now there's going to be questions whether or not, maybe they should have done this 10 years earlier, 15 years, like they had a lot of the initial information, the first gen, green avalanche, the ogre description. They had probably enough to go on and gotten a warrant, and they probably would have caught the guy with the burner on him, and they probably would have been able to get into that burner, and they probably would have been able to make some connections. Better late than never, but it's one of those things that, kind of haunts you when you're thinking about cases like this, but like that case, no matter what you think of the memo, and like, I think it went way too far afield. I think that they should have trimmed that down by about 100 pages, and they should have just kept the Frank stuff in there where they're basically saying that Tony Liggett, the sheriff, had gone in front of the judge and lied, changed up what these witnesses were saying in order to get the warrant, because basically what they're trying to do is suppress, the search of Richard Allen's home, which they found this 40 caliber weapon. Now whether or not that's going to happen now that both attorneys have withdrawn, it's hard to say. But there's a lot of stuff going on in that case, frankly, to me, Joe, that just doesn't smell right. In terms of how it's, and again, and kind of what I want to ask you is law enforcement, like when you were back on the job, like how much did you, or were you able to really communicate with like victims' families? Because that's like one of the things I want to touch on with you, and like maybe have you explain to people, because I don't think that they really understand. People get very upset when law enforcement seems to be keeping, the victims' families kind of in the dark, but frankly, that's because it's a necessity. So I want to kind of ask you, back when you were on the job, like, how did you deal with like dealing with victims' families, like, especially if it was an like ongoing investigation?
Right. Well, at least I had a lot of experience, and especially when I was heading up the cold case squad, because here you're dealing with 20, 30-year-old cases, 10-year-old cases, and you have to handle these things very carefully, specifically with the family. First, we are victimized by someone we know lots of times, and you have to keep that in consideration. So a lot of times family members say, oh, the police have a lack of communication. Well, sometimes that reason is because they don't want to tip anybody off within the family who they think or suspect. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, the reason why there's generally a lack of communication is that the police aren't going to call up the family members and say, hey, I just called to say hi. Just want to let you know we're still looking. We don't have anything, and I'll talk to you next year. They don't. It's not going to happen, right? It's not about a friendly call. It's not like, hey, it's Bob, it's Joe, how you doing? This and that. It's not like that. Generally, the police don't want to call you unless they have something. And when people, think about this, when the police do reach out to the family members, that's the first thing that comes to their mind. They have something. This case is moving forward now, and you don't want to dash those hopes. And
100%.
it's like everything, timing's everything. So we came up with our own kind of measure about when we spoke to the family. And when I was doing this, I guess now going 12, 13 years ago, it's a little different today with the social media aspect. It was started way back when, but it's not like today where you could put out a video and be on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, what have you, within a matter of seconds, and YouTube, and reach tens of thousands of people, right? We didn't have that ability back then. So you have to today be even more careful about that. So you should never do something that the family first hears about it on the news or on YouTube or on something else. That's the first thing. So, and you don't tell the family unless you really have something that you're going to move forward on.
Exactly.
And as well as I do, Bob, the prosecutor is going to want, I call it probable cause plus one, right? You're dealing with a 20-year-old case. And that's what sometimes when I look at the two big cases on the docket now, right? And that's, Delphi and, of course, the Kohlberger case in there. And I look at it and I kind of I'm worried, because when you look at these cases, just from the law enforcement perspective, the Bronx, I called it the People's Republic of the Bronx, dealing dealing with them, where they would say, listen, unless you bring me the Pope and 3 nuns, I'm not doing anything with this case.
Yeah.
And then I look at these cases and I go, I want to see more. I would want, if I would have presented some of these cases, and I'm not just talking about Kohlberg or the Delphi case, and sometimes any of these big cases, I go there and I just shake my head and go, a Bronx district attorney would have never gone for this.
Yeah.
I did an interview. I won't name the book because things kind of went sideways for them. But I did an interview for was a reporter, did a book on a cold case, and the cold case, they made an arrest and the whole thing fell apart and the guy was set free. And I had told him, I said, this would have never gone in New York City. They would have never taken this case. They would have never made an arrest on this, and they would have kept on saying they wanted more. And unfortunately, that's what happened. Then there was big lawsuits. That's why I'm not mentioning nothing, because it's just it's an absolute mess. But the issue that comes down to is from the police perspective on these cases, when you're dealing with something that's 5 years old, the prosecutors generally want more. But in this environment that we're in, where these cases are heating up pretty quickly, and we're seeing, like, look, the Natalie Holloway case now has some closure. I mean, they're talking about John Benet Ramsey again. So we're seeing all of these, which I refer to as celebrated cases, not because we're celebrating them like ha ha ha, but celebrating meaning they're big media news stories.
Yes.
And we're starting to see a lot of movement on some of these cases,
which is amazing.
Sometimes, yeah, it's absolutely amazing. But I also want these prosecutors to slow their roll a little bit and not jump to the affidavit and the grand juries and some of these things, and say, let's hold off, right? Because we know what they say about grand juries, right? You can indict a ham sandwich and everything else, and it's seen as a prosecutorial tool and all those other things that go along with it. But a lot of that's true, right? I mean, a lot of that's true. Right. So I just wanted to see some of these major celebrated cases. Be careful,
right?
And I don't like what I see in certain things, and I'm a little nervous for a couple of these cases.
Yeah, me too. And kind of the way I look at it, like the feds will take forever to develop a case. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like, that's the difference when you're talking about like kind of state cases and federal cases. Like back when I was practicing, Alice and I would get a call on a federal case, and somebody would be like, yo, the feds reached out to me. What can I expect? And I'd say, well, you can expect to be sitting on the burner for about 2 years while they build this case against you. Because when the feds build a case, the thing's like bulletproof. I mean, their conviction rate in the federal level is incredible. I mean, like Allison's beaten 2 federal cases, which is unheard of, frankly. And both judges hated her, because she won the cases. I mean, you just don't beat those cases because they take the time to build the case, and it's like with the Delphi thing, especially, man, like just kind of the way that things are playing out with it. And I did not like that PCA. I just thought it was thin. I thought it was thin from the get. Like you said, Joe, I mean, had you walked into the prosecutor's office back there, they would have been like, yo, man, there's no way I'm going with this thing. You don't have anything on you got mere presence, and you got some guy who's claiming that there's some kind of link, like a tool mark link between a unspent casing that got ejected from a weapon, which, and I keep trying to explain to people, like, look, that's not the kind of tool markings that used to be able to be used in a court of law. An unspent casing, there's not one case in this country that anybody has been convicted as that being the primary piece of evidence, because it's just not reliable scientifically. I mean, like a 40 caliber weapons, you tell me, Joe, is that a pretty common weapon?
Yeah.
Caliber.
Yeah, especially when you're out. This is why I wanted to go there. You see what it's like. I mean, there are woods and the river, and people say I was just hunting. I fired the gun. I mean, there's a million things that you can say to make stuff like that just go away.
Yeah, and it's rural, man. It's like people. I live 2.5 hours. I'm in Delphi. You know what I mean? It's like, because Chicago's real close. I'm in a different time zone in like an hour and a half. And when you get into these rural areas, it's a different way of life. Most people, and I hate to generalize, but I'd say that a majority of the male population in these smaller towns probably own handguns, especially in Indiana. it's a popular caliber weapon in a state where gun ownership is pretty high. And it's just one of those things where when I'm reading through that PCA, they can't make the connection. Like law enforcement wouldn't embrace what their analyst said, what the guy who made like they said they were very careful in that PCA. If you read it, and it was like, look, this is a subjective opinion of that analyst. That was not the prosecution and or law enforcement giving this guy a big hug and saying this is ironclad. They were saying like, we're going to throw it in the PCA because this guy said it, but we're going to make sure that we're saying that it's his subjective opinion. It's not necessarily our opinion. You know what I mean? And like when people read that carefully, and that was kind of the bigger thing, like their bigger piece of evidence in that, because otherwise you've got this guy who made a voluntary statement putting himself out at that bridge, which, look, we all know that these guys, these creeps who are out there that maybe occasionally will go to the funeral. I mean, I know you guys would always be filming funerals to see if somebody was showing up, to check out what people's reactions were, to really scour the crowd and look and see if anybody was sticking out to y'all. And, you get those guys that'll come by crime scenes to revisit if you guys are processing. This wasn't that. Like, this is a guy who's voluntarily putting himself at a place where two girls went missing. This is a different thing, and to me, that's pretty rare. This isn't like an in custody interrogation where somebody's caving, after you guys are doing your work and you break them down and they finally give you a confession or some kind of admission. This is a guy that basically went out and put himself at the crime scene, which is in my 20 plus years of being a criminal defense attorney, extremely rare. That's not something that these criminals typically do, especially guys that are murderers. They don't inject themselves at the crime scene when it's not an in custody type interrogation or interview. You know what I'm saying? Like, to me, it doesn't feel right. I'll flat out say it. I think they got the wrong guy on that one. I really do.
Well, for me, I don't have some of that background information, so the verdict really isn't out for me on that. But I'm an evidence guy. I want the physical evidence. I want all those kind of things that make everything add up. And once you have that, it's pretty much difficult to make that go away, right? So I would say if the defense attorney can't get the evidence, they go after the cops, right? Or vice versa. So wherever, and that's how you know how strong the case is, where the focus is from the defense attorney. I always said that. And 100%. I used to say that, I used to say that in our cases. What is the defense attorney fighting? Well, they're fighting the fingerprints, or they're fighting the ballistics, or they're fighting the blood evidence. I'm like, okay, good. That means we have some solid stuff here, and that we have we're onto something. So I like that. But if it's just about this cop is dirty and he's got a lot of complaints and this and that, then I was like, oh boy, now maybe our case isn't so strong, or or that kind of stuff.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's like the oldest trick in the book. If you got bad facts, I mean, you're always trying to point the finger at the cops saying they screwed up the investigation. I mean, sometimes that's your only move. If you've got a guy. Like, and I'm always explaining to people, look, the reality is that a vast majority of cases plead out. People have this misconception that everything goes to trial, and nothing could be further from the truth. Typically, you guys do the job right. Typically, you've got the evidence. Typically, most criminals aren't very smart and they make all kinds of mistakes. You guys put the pieces together, and then you're turning the investigation file over to the prosecutor. They're turning it over to me. I'm sitting in front of my client. I'm saying, well, they pretty much got you dead to rights here, man. So like my job then shifts into, all right, these are our options. I could either go to trial and get hammered, because this isn't magic. I don't care how silver tongued I am. This isn't going to be a situation where I'm going to be able to talk away the evidence that they have against you. So do you want me to try to negotiate a plea agreement with them to try to get you the best plea agreement that I could get you? And that's typically that conversation. And that's a majority of cases, right? I mean, overwhelming. It's in the 90% that things plead out, man. It's like, that's what most cases are. That's what's happening with them. So, in those cases that do go to trial, what you know, unless you've got a defendant, and I've had them before. I've had defendants where just they're like absolutely adamant about going to trial no matter what I say to them. And it's their choice. I don't get to say, well, I don't want to be your lawyer because I'm not in the business of losing and I'm about to go get my teeth kicked in at this trial because they got you dead to rights. If he says I want to go to trial, I'm going to trial and I'm doing the very best that I can to make sure that there's a fair trial, to make sure that everybody's following the rules, make sure that you guys did your jobs right, make sure that you know everything that the prosecutor is doing is above board. And then I've done my job. You know what I mean? It's like I can't change the facts. They are stubborn things. And no matter, you know, how much I want to change them, you can't because they're the facts. So, yeah, man, but this case, I don't know. We'll see. And I can't wait to have you on after this thing goes to trial when you start hearing about the details of the investigation or lack thereof that happened in this trial. And these guys aren't Bronx cops. You know what I mean? These guys are in rural Indiana that don't get murders. You know what I mean? This is not their purview. You know, they're DUI guys, they're domestic violence guys. They're dealing with the stuff that happens all the time. They're not dealing with double homicides. You know what I'm saying? Like they don't have evidence techs like y'all would have in terms of a crime scene and processing it. So the mistakes that were made, I like not even thinking about it from a defense attorney's perspective, but just thinking about it from like solving the case perspective, it's going to stun you. I don't know what you've heard about it, but it like when I have you on for that, you're going to be like I brought it up to Mac and Mac was like losing her mind, you know, like when I was telling her about some of the stuff that they didn't do and she was just like blown away. She's like, you know how Mac is, like she was losing her mind. So, all right, man, enough of Delphi because I could keep you talking on that for hours. Let's go to, so I want to talk about these two affidavits that dropped. And like you said, so the word on the street is John Ray cooked up a couple more. Is that what you're hearing?
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. Yeah, there's more stuff coming out, which makes for more press conferences. But this press conference was different than any other press conference that John Ray had before. So John Ray, whatever people feel about him or think about him or like him or don't like him, he's really the guy that's kept this case alive in the media for 13 plus years. And he's kept this case front and center, and he's kept Shannon Gilbert in the spotlight too, because, you know, like all of us have said, is without Shannon Gilbert, you don't have a Long Island serial killer case. So,
100%.
Yep. So you had that. So he came out with this, but this one was quite different because the police commissioner, Rodney Harrison himself, was at the podium with him while these affidavits were being read. They weren't read like line by line. It were just kind of summaries. The actual affidavits were more interesting as far as I was concerned than these little story snippets. And I like both of them in the respect that both ladies that came forward in this really have no skin in the game. And the lady with the swinger thing kind of actually implicates herself in some, possible criminality maybe down the road about leaving whomever this woman is. I mean, they think it's Karen Vagata, right? She's saying that.
Right.
But, her and her detective boyfriend taking this young woman, whomever it was, who she said was homeless, was dirty, that she's going to take a shower at the house, and then, leave her there. I mean, it's there's some dangerous things here for her. So
there really are. And so that was the second one, right?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah,
and of course, everyone got caught up in the swinger stuff, right? I mean, that's what everybody got caught up on. But you gotta read in between the lines there and look at some of the quote unquote meat in there, which they didn't redact, is the cop's initials. The cop's initials are in the affidavit, RW.
Right. Exactly. And like, so I wanted to ask from your perspective. So you're looking at these affidavits and you got them on the front end, man, because you're that dude. You're getting stuff before the general public's getting it. What was your take, like from a strictly investigative standpoint? I mean, are you looking and saying, all right, like, and I'm going to switch back to the first one. All right, so the first one, this guy's talking about the taxi driver, and it's a compelling story. Right. I mean, it really is. And it certainly sounds like Heuermann, and like he says as much in there that, when he sees that Heuermann's arrested, he's like, that's the guy, You know what I'm saying? From a investigator standpoint, what are the warts on this? What are the problems with it? Like right up front, like when you're talking to Harrison tomorrow, like what are y'all going to be saying about this thing? Because you guys are going to be talking about this.
Well, it's going to be really difficult. Like I said, I could ask the commissioner tomorrow. Did they do a photo array with the taxi driver, right? But
Right.
the taxi driver's already saying I saw his picture on TV, right? So that's kind of like that, Bob, right? They're going to say everybody saw this guy. Everybody's going to pick him out of a photo array.
Right.
This guy is a giant of a man, right? He's whatever 6'4", 6'5", whatever, 300+ pounds. I mean, if you ran into this guy, especially in a situation where you felt your life threatened, I don't think you would forget his face or anything
Right.
about him. But what I didn't like about this affidavit is the way that it was written. It's not in chronological order. So actually, the second, starting on page, I think 3 or 4, if I remember, is the actual first incident. The second incident is what's written first. So that first incident is really important because does this individual, if it's Rex or whomever, set this driver up because he was afraid that that she'd be able to recognize him, and that's
Right.
why he threatens to drive her out to the woods and everything else like that. So, and the idea behind the woods part is where 2 victims were found out in the woods, out in a place called Manorville, Long Island, which is about 25 miles from where this supposedly occurred in Sayville at the Sayville Motor Inn. Jay went to the actual Motor Inn that's been shut down now because of prostitution. So
Yeah.
it's about 25 miles from Manorville. And this individual allegedly says, we're going to take a ride, right? We're going to go somewhere. So, usually when you're going to take a ride, I always say it's going to be a long time. A drive would be something short, right? So I always look at the words that people use and that kind of thing. So a ride is concerning for me in that respect. But
Right.
what these affidavits do is they're starting to draw lines to dots on the map.
Right.
And there's another thing that John Ray said that a lot of people weren't really focusing in on is that he said he took a deposition from a man named Joe Brewer. Now, Joe Brewer was the guy that hired Shannon Gilbert. So I'm not going to speculate on what that was about, but if you're talking about a connection between Rex and Shannon in these cases, and then you throw in Joe Brewer's name, I don't think you got to be a rocket scientist to figure out where this thing is, where they were headed with this.
Exactly. And
And
so, like I was asked, because I was talking to Jay about this off air, and we were talking about you. I don't know if you were coming on, but I knew he had a concept. Jay had a concept of like a connection, like what in his mind's eye, what he thinks went down here. And with respect to this type of thing, where like my problem with it is the lack of substantiation. You know what I'm saying? It's like I want to see, because it's like you said, we all saw Heuermann. Yes, it fits the bill. Obviously, I've never heard a more apt description of somebody than calling that dude an ogre. Like I've heard great nicknames for people. If we wanted to call that a nickname, that's as spot on as you can get. I mean, that dude is the ogre. That is the perfect description of him. And he's just that kind of guy that I believe that you would probably never forget. Like I rarely see mountain people like that. I remember I was on a flight one time and I happened to be behind this guy who had to have been like 6'9" and probably weighed like 350. He was a monstrous human being. I had never been that close to somebody that huge in my entire life. And I was standing right behind him coming off the Southwest. And lo and behold, it turned out to be a Bears offensive lineman, guy named Big Cat Williams. But I'll never forget seeing him. Not like strip away the fact that he, like, after the fact, I learned that he was famous. Like, I just like you don't forget seeing something like that, somebody like that. So from that sense of it, it's very believable. But like, it would be nice to get the dispatcher's affidavit saying that he recalls any of this information, because the dispatcher played a big part in this. You know what I'm saying? Like, especially in his affidavit. And I was going to ask you, I was reading through that affidavit and I was a little bit confused he was talking about like the dispatcher could like see things. Like, what was he talking about? Like, because he was like he's like, hey, I see that you're doing this and you're doing that, or I'm seeing like the gunshots.
Yeah.
Like, how does that happen?
I think they were bluffing it. I think she might have been holding the key to the microphone of the taxi, right? So some of that is not explained, and I think that's what that was about. But the interesting thing, if we just go back to the one with the swinger case,
Yeah,
she describes certain things in that house, right? She describes these things like the seashells and the Christmas trees and all these other things. Now, we know they executed a search warrant there. They were there for like 10 days, right? And, and not only did they take everything, but they photograph everything, including the whole house.
right.
So it'd be interesting to see if some of the things that she describes in the affidavit will actually show up in some of the photos, because
100%.
then right. So yes, there needs to be some corroboration with some of these things, but there also needs to be evidence, right? So there's got to be some sort of evidence to say that Karen Vagata was in that house, and so this one person said, "I think it's her. I know it's her." It's all, it becomes speculation now. Could she be charged with perjury? No, because she's just going to say, "That's what I thought. That's what I put on there," and so I was mistaken, but it wasn't something that I did intentionally, kind of thing. So, in the day, at the end of the day, these affidavits really don't mean much, except for they're starting to draw parallels, right?
Right.
John Ray is making a parallel that Rex Heuermann has a connection to Shannon Gilbert. He has a connection to Karen Vagata.
Right.
And with Commissioner Harrison being there, he seems to, well, remember, we don't know really any of the evidence or anything that's going on. Some of these things they could have corroborated already. They could have gotten the dispatcher's records. They could have gotten video surveillance from the Sayville Motor Inn way back when, or what have you. So there could be a lot of things that they do have that we are not privy to. Now,
Right.
do I think they have the video from that night? No, I really don't. And
no way. There's 0% chance. Like,
right.
like
I don't
well,
think
not
they have
zero.
it.
I'll put it at 1%. I'll give them
Right.
1%. But like, yeah, no.
Yeah, I would give them 1% or even less, right? So the issue that comes down to is these are fine, they look good on paper, but at the end of the day, you still need to have some sort of corroborating evidence, whether it's physical evidence. A single eyewitness identification is not going anywhere.
Right.
It's not going anywhere, especially in New York. New York has, there's a case, if people want to look it up, People versus LeGrand, and it's basically said it was a People versus LeGrand. It's actually a New York case, and they say that basically if you have a single ID witness case, you have basically nothing. So
someday, Joe, I'm going to have a mod that is going to throw in case citations. So when my guests give a case citation, they'll be able to click right on it and they'll go right to the case. That'll be cool.
Yeah, that would be cool. So, cool. And I kind of throw these cases out on a lot of different things because the case law is very important to a lot of these things, because people say, oh, she's an eyewitness. Yeah, okay. Single eyewitness, New York, forget it. Right? There needs to be more. Some parallels. There's some things that are getting drawn out to it. The deposition of Joe Brewer is interesting, right? So it's interesting because now you're bringing in Oak Beach, you're bringing in Shannon Gilbert, you brought in Rex Heuermann and having at least one date with Shannon Gilbert, right? That's what the allegation is. So you're starting to connect the dots with all these people and all these places.
And that's what I take from these. You know what I mean? They went to a place where they're able to actually give a connection. Like they're putting, like you said, they're connecting those dots to where they're showing that there was a connection between Heuermann and these folks. You know what I'm saying? And now it's up to law enforcement, which I know Rodney's not going to be able to talk about tomorrow, but like it might be enough for them to say, all right, he gave us a baseline to work from now. You know what I'm saying? And it kind of reminds me like of the concept of IGG, where you get like, where they like to say, well, we consider it just to be a tip. And then law enforcement's got to flesh everything out, there's a lot of truth to that. It's like when Gacy, when they finally were able to identify Francis Alexander, which was their most recent, which was now at this point a couple of years ago, they used IGG, but they still, like, after the lab came back and they said, look, okay, this is who we think it is, Chicago PD and the Cook County Sheriff's Department still had to vet it, right? They still had to make sure, okay, they're saying that's who we think it is, but now we have to try to place him in the city of Chicago at the time that he went missing in order for us to feel comfortable saying this is definitively him. Because with IGG, it wasn't 100%. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he just could not be excluded as the primary source of the DNA. And like with that, it was very old DNA. It was like 40 plus years old, but it was very strong in terms of what they were able to put together in terms of, again, putting the dots together. And it got law enforcement to looking into this kid, and they found that he had a couple of parking tickets, you know, which was like bingo. Like now we know he was in the city. We know what day he was in the city. And, you know, so it's like, to me, these affidavits are kind of like doing that type of thing where they're giving law enforcement a baseline. And I think they gave them enough to where you hope that they're going to dig into it. You know what I mean? They certainly shouldn't be dismissed offhand. At least I wouldn't think. You know what I'm saying?
Well, there's a wild card here, right? So you got this guy. He either still is a cop or was a cop, right? And if he's got, there's a lot of questions I would have for him because, you know, like, how did you come across this individual? Whoever it is, right? I'm not going to, you know, they say it's Karen Vergata, but we don't know, right? We don't know it's her. They said, well, now they see the picture, right? But a lot of times people see the picture on TV and go, oh, I remember now. You know, so I always take that with a grain of salt. But the issue that comes down to is that this cop gets her from somewhere, whether it's central booking or picks her up somewhere along the line, who knows? And then brings her along with this woman to this alleged sex party at Rex's house. And that's why I think, like, so I know you brought up the page with the seashells and stuff like that. And she's talking about distinctive looking seashells that she knows back from her country. We know she's African American, so I'm assuming like maybe West Indian, Jamaican, that kind of stuff, and that kind of race. And then what happens now is the stuff that they have at the house, right? Does it match up to anything, you know, out of the ordinary, right? I mean, listen, you live on Long Island, you have the ocean all around you. So having seashells in your home is not really, you know, an odd thing because we all live within close proximity of the ocean and the Long Island Sound. So, I mean, you live on an island. I always tell people you live on an island, right? So, you know, 4 million people living on the island. It's a big place. But
yeah,
seashells,
but like you said, though, man, they're pretty common. Geographically, they're going to be common, but
something about these struck her
exactly is memorable. You know, because I mean, theoretically, she's from the same area. She knows, you know, obviously, like maybe they're enormous. Like she said, they're large. There's two large ones, so and they're probably intact. You know what I mean? Like, you know, my kids will bring half broken seashells. I'm like, oh, that's beautiful. Throwing it back in the ocean when they run away. But, you know, like, so if they could put these two things together, and like you said, I mean, you assuming that they're scouring those pictures in terms of, you know, maybe had John Ray not just blasted on her like that, he could have had a situation where he's like, hey, you know, like, can I come and take a look in the house to see if you all still have those seashells? You know what I mean? But like, there's no chance of that happening now. That bridge has been burnt, you know?
Well, I'll tell you, if they didn't get pictures of it now and they were there, they're not there anymore. So that's for sure. So I'm assuming, you know, when I hear about large seashells, whatever, I'm thinking about like the conch shells, right? So something you might find in the Caribbean kind of thing, you know, the ones that they blow into on the TV, that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Something, whatever these shells were, attracted her attention.
Right.
So to me, and remember, this affidavit was taken only a couple of weeks ago. This was done after the search warrant. So if they don't have photographs of everything within the house, then they're kind of out of luck in that respect. But it would have been a nice little cooperation to say, these are the seashells, and then showing her, is this the seashell? Then, you know, kind of like say, well, at least we can then prove that she was there, right? We don't even know she was actually in Rex's house, right? She says she was, she says the ogre, but then she also said something like, I think I had sex too. Like she didn't even remember, kind of thing.
Right. Well, it's strange that she's remembering specific items in there, but but I mean, it's like I'm not going to sweat her because she didn't remember getting laid that night or having sex. But
well, I mean, it could be drugs involved and alcohol too, so you might
sure.
not remember. But but she's got details of certain things, right? She talks about the Christmas tree, that it was odd. It was because it was like during the holiday that we do this kind of stuff, but it was way after Christmas. That's a Long Island thing too. Some of the people keep their Christmas tree lights up until like June when it's nice to take them down.
No,
But
I'm not going to try to like put myself on blast, but there have been Christmas trees in the Mata house until late February.
yeah,
I'm just saying. I like the lights, man. They're pretty. It's like, it's
a pain in the butt to
problematic
take them
when I
down.
went back. Yeah, I went back to live trees. So then it became problematic because it's like a tinder box just sitting.
Yeah, you worry about fire.
Yeah, you really do. All right, so tomorrow, Harrison's coming on. That's going to be an amazing thing. And like you said, I mean, like there's going to be stuff that you're going to ask him that he's not going to be able to answer just because he's active. Still, you're going to ask the questions, I'm sure. But like one of the things that I wanted to touch on, and people that have like ultimately, I'm going to merge this thing. And like on one of my lives last week, I have an old Chicago cop named Bill Dorsch, another 20 plus year guy, homicide detective, retired. And he's been digging into the Gacy thing forever. Him and I are actually pursuing, we believe there's additional victims, and Bill has been doing an incredible amount of research, incredible amount of interviews for 20 plus years, man, at this point, since it'll be 20 and that's more than 20. And we have gotten resistance from law enforcement. Like, I mean, the one thing about Chicago is that it's a misnomer that Gacy was a Chicago case because geographically they always call it a Chicago case. Yeah. But if you're from here, you know that it didn't actually happen in Chicago proper. And if you're from a big city that has tourism as a major revenue driving source, they don't want bodies. They don't want body counts rising. They don't want murders. Chicago's got a big enough problem as it is with that kind of thing. So they were thrilled.
That was an issue with Long Island serial killer. I mean, it's right by the Hamptons, not far from the Hamptons and everything else. So yeah, it's not really good for tourism.
It's not a good look, right? So in Chicago, it was the same way. And so when Gacy turns out to be in Des Plaines, which is a suburb of Chicago, same county, Cook County, but definitely not in the city of Chicago, they were thrilled. They were like, "Oh man, that's awesome!" Not that there's victims, but that it wasn't on their property. It wasn't in their districts. It wasn't in the city proper. So they were thrilled about that. And so, Bill had an occasion to see Gacy one night. He had dinner with him. There's this little famous story that Bill always tells, that his wife was an insurance adjuster and she used to give Gacy like small jobs. He'd come in for small claim jobs, just fixing things that people would make a claim on. And Gacy would come in and she give. So one night he's like, "Hey, I want to thank you for all the claims. And I'd like to invite you and your wife, or you and your husband and your kid over for dinner." So they do. They go over to Gacy's house. They have the dinner. A few months later, like Bill's driving home because he's getting off shift about 2 a.m. He's going home. He happens to live like 50 yards away from where this building that Gacy was a maintenance man for 5 years that his mother ended up moving into. And like he sees Gacy out there with a shovel, right? And he's like at 2 a.m. Bill's like, "Hey, John, what are you doing there, buddy? What are you doing with the shovel?" And Bill's, he's like, Gacy's like, "Well, Bill, you got not enough hours in the day. You got to do it when you can do it." And Bill's like, "Oh, okay." Doesn't think anything of it. This is like 73, 74. Lo and behold, in 78, late 78, when Gacy gets arrested, Bill is like, "Holy shit." Like he remembers this shovel story. So he goes, and it's not his district. So he goes to the 5th district in Chicago, goes to the captain in there and says, "Hey, Cap, I just want to let you know, you could do with it whatever you want. But, about 4 years ago, I saw Gacy thinking that they're going to be doing, Bill's thinking that they're going to be doing what they're doing with Rex Heuermann, where they're trying to investigate to see if there's additional victims." That's what Bill's mindset is. Bill's just assuming that they'll be doing that because it's what their job is. That's what cops should be doing. And so he tells the captain, he's like, "Oh, thanks for the info, Bill." And they do like, there's nothing. Like, so Bill, he gives him a few names of people that lived in the building. So that was how Bill knew that they didn't do anything. He'd go talk to the, like this guy, Bruno. He's like, "Bruno, did they ever come talk to you?" He's like, "No, I never heard anything from them." So that really stuck in Bill's craw. that really pissed Bill off. And so ultimately Bill started digging into the Gacy case, and he started interviewing all these people. And so what we're going to be doing, we're going to be boots on the ground. We have at least 3 locations that we think that we know. Like one of them, we've done a ground penetrating radar scan. We've seen the anomalies. Cook County Sheriff has done what we call a sham dig over there, meaning that they put a little tent up. They went in there for 15 minutes. They kicked the GPR guys out. They came out 10 minutes later. It's like nothing. Like, here's an old plate. That's the anomaly. And they called it. They said investigation over. So we weren't satisfied with that. We continue not to be satisfied with it. So I just want to ask from a law and sport, like from your perspective, like, what is your expectation in terms of them continuing to investigate beyond what they've already got them arrested for?
Right.
Because when you have these types of guys, there's a high likelihood that they've killed more. So what do you expect typically, Joe?
Well, I'm just going to give you a little bit longer answer. There was a lot of issues with the initial investigation in regards to what happened with even Shannon Gilbert, right? They waited basically until it was already well into the spring to start searching for these things once they uncovered it, right? So then all the bramble had grown in and the weeds had grown in. There was a lot of things I questioned, and I was on the record early, and I got a lot of pushback from Suffolk County cops and that kind of thing. But, come on, guys. But people also failed to remember on October 30th and 31st on 2012, we had Hurricane Sandy, and that entire place was underwater. And they had started finding bodies in 2011 and that kind of stuff. So there could have been other additional victims that were washed away that they never had located initially. And I think there was a reluctance because of its location where it was not far from, the nouveau riche, so to speak, out in the Hamptons. They were kind of like saying, don't look, don't tell. And then when Rex was arrested, if you looked at a map where he lived near a large place called the Massapequa Preserve. And the Massapequa Preserve is just what it sounds like. It's you can't build preserve land, nature walks and bike paths that lead up into Bethpage State Park. So we're talking about thousands and thousands of acres that they can't build upon. And it leads to Bethpage State Park, where they have the black course, which is where they have sometimes the PGA goes and plays one of their Masters rounds, I think, or some. I'm not a golfer, but whatever one of the top golf things, they do it in Bethpage State Park. So, and as soon as this case hit, I had just made a post on Twitter and said, if I was in this investigation, I would be scouring the Massapequa Preserve, which is only like 2 or 3 blocks from his house. Because if you're telling me for 12 years nothing happened because his dumping ground, or whomever's dumping ground this was out in Ocean Parkway, now that was closed off to him, you think he stopped? He might have stopped for a little while, right? Because he got a little scared when things happened. But over time, did he get like back into it because he's saying, I'm like invincible, nobody knows me? I mean, you're talking 13 years.
Yeah.
So you have to find a new place for it. And the cops kind of tipped themselves off too when they said they moved on this quickly, because I think maybe he was going back into the game kind of thing. They were up on his phones probably, and there was some things there. So yeah, there was a lot of bad things that were going on in the investigation way back when. And when you look at what has transpired in the last year now in this case, it's absolutely mind-boggling how fast it's moved.
Right.
And we didn't mention it before, but the affidavits, but the district attorney put out a memo on these and saying he was not happy basically about doing this. And
yeah,
so we heard about this united front.
yeah,
is the United, once again, politics always is at play, and those kind of, no matter how good things look on the surface or what you say, it's always everybody wants to be
the hero.
That's a good word. I was going to say the man, but that's probably not a term we're not allowed to use anymore. But it's something that is a problem, because this case is finally moving forward. Now all of a sudden we're going to see politics come into it again. Oh,
Exactly.
good grief!
Yeah, one-upmanship is like we don't need it. Let's just
No.
solve the cases. Let's get these families and the victims' families closure. Let's get the guy convicted. You know, I mean, it's like they're like don't lose sight of the real goal. You know, it's like it's a shame that money drives us like as a society, but it does, and it's like because money and politics go hand in hand. I mean, that's just facts. You know, it's like I think everybody goes into these things with you know with their heart in the right place and wanting to do good and do right, and then I think that people's egos and greed just infiltrate it. You know, and I mean it's unfortunate, but like we can always hope that there's going to be the good ones in there because they're everywhere. You know, there's always the good ones there. And, you know, we just hope that it doesn't do anything to you know, hamper what's
derail
going on.
It. Yeah. But politics always does.
Always does, dude. It does. All right, dude. I love you, Joe. You're amazing. I could talk to you for hours, my brother. Again, give everybody, and they've been putting it all up in the link. Please, you guys, go subscribe to Joe. His channel's amazing. Tomorrow's going to be amazing. If you didn't hear his knowledge base like during this last hour, you weren't listening. There's no other way I could put it. So make sure you're following him. I will definitely be there in the chats tomorrow. And it's going to be a great show. Tell them when to watch it again, Joe.
Yep, 11 a.m. tomorrow Eastern Daylight Savings Time at Joseph Giacalone on YouTube.
Dude, you're an amazing human being. Thank you so much for coming on. And
thanks for having me, Bob. Listen, we got to do this again when we have a little more time when we're not up against another show.
Yeah, we got to get you all over
to Jay.
Yep. I love you, man. See ya. Thanks.
Take care, man.
All right, y'all. So Jay's getting ready to roll here. I'm actually probably a minute late, so I'm excited. Hey, real quick, like I had some people complaining about me giving the shout outs like during the show, so I'm going to do it now. Hope Hate for Fear, thank you, new member. Janet, new member, thank you. Ashley, $10 holla for Bob and Joe, thank you so much. Hope Hate for Fear, thank you. Another membership, gifting. Jedi Platypus, as always, you're amazing. Thank you so much. Deja Vu, same, you're amazing. And a beautiful $5. I don't know if that's a super sticker or what it is from. It's a Crime and Shame, clever name. All right, so thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll be back Wednesday. Allie will be back with me. If y'all are like, where's Allie? She's still here. She had to run some errands and take care of some real life stuff, but she'll be here Wednesday. I think it might just be me and her. I'm hoping there's going to be a drop in the Delphi stuff and as far as Rosie's actual motion being filed, and that could be interesting. So, all right, let's portal you. Hopefully this works. I hope I did it right. You guys will see you next time on Wednesday for more Just Facts. See ya.